please welcome the incredible Danielle White.
Thanks for having me. I mean, I know we're virtual, but it's still fun to get to know you, fun to meet you, even though I'm not officially in person, and I'm excited to be here.
I know, and you're launching is it a new show?
So I've actually been podcasting for about 6 years. I had a podcast called Big Money Stylist, and it's funny, I used it as like a lead magnet, and I would teach hairstylist principles to get them to come do my education. So it worked great because 6 years ago, nobody was really doing that. But then just this last year, I rebranded my podcast to Danielle K. White because I wanted to go outside of the hair community. I wanted to have a bigger voice. And it's been really fun. I've had some really cool people on my show, and I've gotten some really great relationships. Because you think you've like made it in one area, but then you're like, wait, there's so many other different pools that I can jump into and kind of like share my light, if that makes sense. But so it's been good.
That you had Lori Harder.
Yeah.
She just came on my show, and Ashley DeLello. She was just actually, funny enough, she was in Kelowna.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I know, so random. She came on my show because she's in Utah. She came on my show like a month and a bit ago. And when we were wrapping up, she's like, I'm going to be in Kelowna. I was like, that's weird. Yeah. No one comes here. Why are you here? Yeah, she was speaking at an event. So we did actually our first like live studio recording, which was cool with an audience. And then there was a couple other familiar faces I saw on your show. I love it. It's like same type of guests. Our audiences want the same thing.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I know. I feel like a growth mindset, you know?
That's it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like from a 30,000 foot view, when I look at all the successful entrepreneurs, it's not like you knew a secret hack on how to like grow your audience or to make sales calls. There's no secret.
Right.
The work that you did was all on the inside. It's a mindset. And that work, which is the hardest work because you have to intentionally face your demons.
Right.
To be able to grow. And look at where you are now. So tell us about what you do.
Oh, okay. So I'm like, where do I start? So I'm one of the crazy few, like all of us are. And I've been married for 21 years. We have 5 kids, Garrett and I. And I am a hairstylist by trade. And my business now is catered towards educating hairstylists. And I have a hairline called Isla Hand Tied Hair. So it's funny though, because like when people are like, what do you do? And I'm like, I do hair by trade, but I've like kind of turned it into a little mini empire. But I honestly, like, I didn't really want that. I just thought get married, live happily ever after. I was like, and then life happens. And, 13 years ago, Garrett and I like lost everything. And I was like, well, the skill that I have is doing hair. So I never knew as a hairstylist, and like you said, mindset, like I never knew I could get to the level of success, doing hair. But I was kind of thrown into a circumstance where it's like, well, here we go. So that's kind of like the beginning of my story, but I have a hair technique called Natural Beaded Rows. So I've educated thousands of hairstylists all over the country and even the world. And then, like I said, I used to own a salon, I sold it. I'm not actively doing hair as much anymore. I'm just more into marketing and sales and coaching and just really pushing the hair education. So that's a really quick like wrap up of kind of who I am and what I created. But I mean, it's been, like I said, 20 years in the making. So I've been doing hair actually for 21 years. So it's crazy.
Okay. So it's pretty much for the length of your marriage.
Yeah.
You went from painting this picture of being a wife and a mother, and then now you're a very successful entrepreneur.
Yeah. It's crazy. Yeah. I was like, I'm just going to do hair as a hobby.
Two different mindsets. How did you do that? How did you just go from being like, here's the dream life that I wanted to live, and now there's this thing there's opportunity and there's so much possibility, and you took the leap.
I mean, honestly, it's crazy because, I mean, I went to Paul Mitchell Hair School. I immediately was like, I really love doing hair. Fun fact about me, I never wanted to do hair. I was like, everybody, I was from Utah, and I'm like, everybody does hair. Like, that's like their default. And so I was like, I guess I'll do hair. And then I really, really loved it and enjoyed it. But the crazy thing is, hairstylists they look down on themselves because they're in the service industry. So they don't value what they do, and they just kind of go, they're not very like business savvy. I know because I was there. And I started doing hair as more of like a hobby. But I got married young. I got married at 20 and I expected my husband to provide and take care of me, but I wanted something outside of that for myself. But it was very different mindset back, 20 years ago because I told Gary, I was like, I'm going to work for fun and you have to pay the bills. I flat out told him that. And because I had that mindset though, like I didn't charge a lot. I really enjoyed what I did. And so it was like a passion and I just did it as for fun. And it wasn't until I had been doing hair for about 10 years. And I always joke around like I have naturally really crappy hair. So for me, I wanted to find a type of extensions that didn't damage my hair and looked really natural. So that's how I ended up creating my own system because I had just tried so many different methods and things like that. And then just mixed a bunch of different things I learned over the years together and created my own hair extension technique. But the mind shift really came when we lost it all. It was like when the market crashed. When was that? 13 years ago. Mm-hmm. And my husband Garrett was in banking and mortgages. And so he had like 40 employees, but I was just kind of doing hair as a hobby. And what's crazy, when we were losing it all, I could see the ship sinking. Like I was literally like, this isn't like, we just kept going in debt and debt and debt and debt and more in debt. But I was like, oh, I'm just the hairstylist. I'm the wife. Like it's not my responsibility. And the funny thing is, I should have like seen the red flags and course corrected, but I was so young. So it was just like the debt kept racking up and racking up and racking up, and I didn't say anything, and then everything imploded. We had to like short sell our home, our cars got repoed, like literally like rock bottom. At this time, I had 2 daughters, and I think I was, like I said, I was forced into a situation where it's like, a lot of times I feel like women have the tool right in front of them, but they don't value it. So they don't see it as something that could actually be impactful. And so for me, I'm like a hairstylist. Like, how is that going to be impactful? How am I going to make money? And so I was just like, well, my husband is not producing. I came from, my parents were entrepreneurs. So I had a standard. I grew up in a 12,000 square foot home. Like that was my standard. So for me, I expected to be successful. And so, we're losing everything and my husband's not paying the bills. And I just kind of was like, well, if maybe I can help. That's literally, I was like, maybe I can help. And at the time, Garrett and I were like in a really rough spot. He had an emotional affair with another woman. Like it was like rock bottom. Like when I say rock bottom, like we were literally like selling furniture out of our house to pay for a move. Like it was bad. So when you're kind of forced in that situation, it's like, I got to shift my mindset and actually not do this as a hobby so that we can eat next week.
Right.
So it was crazy. And that's like, a lot of people don't hear the beginning of my story. They just see the success you have now. But it was hard because like I said, I always wanted to be a mom, but I always wanted something outside of just being the mom role. And I will tell you right now, kudos to any women who are the full-time mom role, because I've been doing that recently and I think it's harder.
It's so hard.
I'm like, it's like literally harder. But
we just did a month away, Australia, Bali. And I intentionally took a sabbatical. The first time I ever took time off since my kids were born.
Oh, wow.
And it was like, man, this is a transition to go from being able to create my own schedule and nobody demanding my time when I didn't want to give it, to now it's like 24/7. Wow. It is a lot.
Right. Yeah, so it's a lot. You're like, I just want to go to the bathroom, like, and not have anybody bother me. Is that too much to ask?
Yeah. No. And if it's not a kid, it's a husband or a dog, wondering why you're in the bathroom and taking so long.
Literally, my teenagers will literally like, I'll be going to the bathroom and they'll walk in and be like, hey, mom, do you have a second? And I'm like, can I just finish? And then maybe like, can you leave me alone?
Okay. So then now you went from thinking that you were going to live this life of being a wife and mother, and now you're growing this business coming out of your rock bottom and thinking, like, at this point, were you thinking there's nothing left to lose? Like, I just got to go up. Yeah.
Kind of. And you know what's crazy is I always tell people, I'm like, I think it's easier to build when you're at rock bottom. When 100%. You're comfortable, you're like, oh, there's too much at risk. Like, why? But when you've lost everything, you're like, I have no choice. I have to eat dinner tomorrow.
Well, there's so that's also like when you're comfortable because you're successful, you become mediocre. Most people just don't push themselves. Like when you're at the rock bottom, you have to go out. You have to make money. It has to work for you. And then, but if you're just coasting, you get kind of stuck sometimes in how easy things are. And then your work doesn't, there's no forcing function for you to push it to that next level. Unless you're someone like, my husband, no matter what, he's like, next level, next level. Yeah. I remember the moment he came up to me, this was years ago, probably, I don't know, 2013, I don't even know. And he's like, yo, like we had a certain amount of debt that was just not good. And we needed to get out of it. And it was like $150,000 in a line of credit. And this was like from building 2 homes and all this stuff. But we were looking at the future and it would have taken us years to pay it off based on how we were growing our businesses. And he woke up one morning and he's like, yo, you need to start making this much money, because I had a PR agency, and I need to start making this much money. We need to do this. And I said, oh my gosh, I didn't realize how bad it was getting. And I just rolled out of bed that day, and it was like that forcing function, that nudge to just grow and grow. And you're right. Sometimes you need that rock bottom or soft bottom to light the fire off under your butt to keep going.
I know. It's crazy. Like even, but I think when you get too comfortable too, there's this like level of like where you're kind of like depressed. You're like, you need that purpose in life in order to continue like to evolve and grow as a human being. So it's like, there's no, like I always, even like just recently the home that we were in California, it was like my dream home. We only lived there for about 4 years. And I was like, we're going to live here for the rest of our lives. And then I was like, I feel too comfortable and a little bit depressed. And my husband was like almost offended. Like, are you kidding me? You have the dream life. And I was like, I mean, we got the cars and the house and the things. I'm like, but that's not what life's about, you know? So it was actually a hard leap for us to get to Miami because like we were in a good space. We like had dug ourselves out of the ditch. And then we were like, we had to have like a real honest moment of like, yeah, we got to keep pushing and growing.
Was there any part of you that felt like you didn't deserve that? Didn't deserve everything you've created?
I don't think I ever felt like I didn't deserve it. Because I knew like the dark times that we went through and how hard we worked and how many, both me and my husband, how many stories we shattered to kind of get to where we were at. And like I was raised in Utah in like a very like strict Mormon culture. And so that itself, I had to like break out of that box. So I didn't feel like unworthy or anything. I just I got to this place literally where I was like, we made it. We have this amazing house in Orange County and all these things and our relationship's good. I'm like, why do I feel kind of like something's missing? So for me, it was just like, and I actually fought it for like a year. It was like, you got to go. And then I got to this point where I was starting to get like a little bit depressed. And I was like, well, this isn't good. And so for me, I didn't feel unworthy. I just felt like there's never like an end point. You got to just keep going.
So what was the trigger for the depression? And like great awareness too, because sometimes people just drag their heels through this for years.
Yeah. And you have Irish twins, right? I had to look up what that is because I was like, I'm like, what are Irish twins? And isn't it you had them, they're like less than a year apart?
Yeah, they're 11 months apart.
Okay. So I had my last 2 kids were pretty close, not that close, but they were 2 years apart. And I remember like my body had finally recovered. And then I found out I was pregnant with, again, my 4th daughter was a surprise baby. And so it just like kind of pulled the rug underneath me, you know, because I was like, whoa, 4 kids, that's a lot. And I think what triggered the depression is I stopped kind of growing my business, which that's when I started my business 10 years ago, I was like in the hustle of things, right? And I loved it. And it was hard, but I remember feeling very rewarded and satisfied. And like, I loved the hustle. And so for me, it was like, I had my 4th baby and I kind of just put aside. I just kind of like, my business was just kind of there. I wasn't pursuing anything out of just like, I was kind of doing the mom thing, but I had a lot of mom guilt. And I was like, well, I just kind of like let my passion like kind of sit there. And so I was like, oh, I love my kids, but I want more. Like, I really enjoy like what I do. And there's a lot of like, for me, I feel like teaching and educating and the impact that it makes even in my hair community is very fulfilling for me. So I think kind of what going back to what triggered the depression is I felt like I was stagnant, you know? And so it was like we were going on these lavish trips and like all this stuff. And on social media, it looks amazing. And not to be ungrateful, it was amazing, right? It's fun. It's fun to travel and do all the things. But that's at some point you're like, okay, am I distracting myself? Like, it's like we know what we're supposed to do and where we're supposed to go. So I just kind of like had this prompt and it was just like, hey, you need to keep going. You need to keep going. And I finally was like, last fall, I just was really honest with my husband. I was like, hey, like, I am super grateful for the life we have built. However, it's time to go. And we were at dinner. This is so funny. We were just like at dinner and I said that exactly to him. And he's like, where are we going? I go, we need to move to Miami. He's like, okay. So he's like, wow. So I don't know. It was just kind of this thing where, you know, when your heart tells you you need to go or, you know, it's just like, you got to listen.
That's how we found ourselves here in Kelowna. So we used to be on the way east coast of Canada. So I'm talking east of Maine. And like most Americans don't even know that there's a whole state called Maine that exists. Because they're like, that's practically Canada. And it is. We were east of that. And I love it out there, incredible people, but there was just not enough going on for the life that we wanted to live. And we had to move. And we had our target set for San Diego. And then the pandemic happened, and then there was the elections happening in the States. And we're like, oh, let's just stay close to home. So we moved out here. We moved to this town because this is where people move for lifestyle. And like immediately we got healthier. Immediately we had a better relationship. Immediately our businesses started growing. So when you go to the environment in which you know there's a calling for you to be there intuitively because something special is going to happen, you just have to make that decision and not be shy to say, hey, listen, I want out of here. And I wanted to move a year after we moved there. And we lasted 9 years. It's a little bit too long.
Oh, wow.
Don't do that. Yeah. So question, why Miami?
It's funny because in California, everyone's like, why are you moving? Like, because to them, it's like, we did it, we made it, you know, but I love the ocean. I love the water and I don't mind the heat. Everyone's like, it's so hot there. It's so hot there. But 10 years ago, we moved to California and I'm originally from Utah. And like, once you live by the water, it's just like the energy is amazing. And Miami, like 2 years ago, we started coming out here for Grant and Elena Cardone's events. We got invited to some of their smaller events. And I remember sitting in the back of these rooms with all these entrepreneurs, not very many. There's probably like 50 people. It's a smaller event. And I'm listening to them talk about life and possibility and how much they made in an hour. And I remember sitting in the back thinking like, oh my God, I'm like the broke bitch in the back of this room. Like, like I was like, okay, like I'm feeling, you know, really significant that I built this hair brand and like really proud of myself to be like, I just got real humbled. So for me, I was like, okay, like I need to dream even bigger. And we came to like probably like 4 different events. We went on like a yacht cruise. And every time we would come down here, it just felt alive. It felt like energy. It felt like opportunities. And Orange County is amazing, but it's quiet and it's a little bit sleepy and it's a lot of like established entrepreneurs. And we were like the youngest people in our neighborhood. I mean, we had like billionaires in our neighborhood, but they're not the same. They're ready to settle in. Like they're good. So for us, it was just, I felt, even though we lived in this amazing, you know, 12,000 square foot home, it was just right on the water. It just felt stagnant. So when I would come to Miami, just the people that we were around and the energy, I was like, we need to go to Miami. You know, it could have been anywhere. It could have been going to New York, but this is just where we had been traveling for events and things. So it was just like, and like I said, I love the water. So this is kind of where we landed. And it's funny because when we came out here and started looking at homes, I got the same feeling I did 10 years ago when we went to California. And I was like, this is home. And Garrett looked at me and he's like, yeah, wow. You know, so it didn't feel like an unnatural transition. It seemed like a good fit.
So we had a lot of friends that actually moved from California to Miami. Yeah, it just seemed like the place to be. We love it there, except where we are, it takes forever to get there. It takes a whole day to get to Florida so
wow. I'm like, where?
Really way. So think about like Seattle. Mm-hmm. We're like a 5-hour drive to Seattle, more northeast. Yeah, and like pretty much for us to go anywhere, we have to go to another spot like Vancouver or Seattle or Calgary. So anyway, we love Florida too.
Yeah.
Not someone that would sign up for hurricanes though.
I know. That's the first thing I got. Everyone's like, it's so hot there and there's hurricanes. And I was like, well, we won't stay here during the hurricane. I'm sure we'll go somewhere else.
Yeah. Well, there's also like forest fires and wildfires in California. There's always something. I know,
right? There's
always something.
Yeah.
Okay, so then backpedaling a little bit, going from building this hair extension company, how did you know this was the thing, and how did you even start that process?
It's funny because it kind of just like fell into my lap. I think a lot of times we feel like we're unqualified, and those are really the times that you're the most qualified. And like anybody, it's like we are so hard on ourselves to put ourselves out there, but you can't become the expert until you actually do the work. So I had put 10 years into becoming the expert at my craft. I felt really good about the skills that I had, and I felt like doing hair came very natural to me. It was very fun. I think that's why I had a hard time charging for it. I honestly like the transformations with hair extensions because I've always struggled with my hair. I almost felt like I should be paying them. Like I had women like crying leaving my salon, and it just, for me, I was like, I love what I do. So yeah, it was just one of those things where I'm like, okay, it came very natural to me, but I launched my brand literally because we had lost everything. And I never knew it was going to get to the level it did. But it just started with me kind of putting myself out there and see what would happen. I remember I just started on like YouTube of all things. Instagram wasn't alive. And I just started like sharing hair tips and things like that. Back now, that's like normal, right? But back 13 years ago, you were a weirdo if you had a cell phone and you're walking around public, like talking about whatever. But I was like, I got to pay the bills and provide. And so I kind of just let that go. And it's crazy because I remember when I first kind of started my brand and I felt like the whispers, like, who does she think she is? Like, da-da-da-da. Because the first brand I started, I called Natural Beaded Rows. So it was like this technique that I had created. And my husband came to me and he's like, you need to start a brand. And I'm like, what do you mean a brand? I'm a hairstylist. He's like, no, you need to start a brand. Again, it's super common now, but back then it wasn't a thing. The brands were Vidal Sassoon and Paul Mitchell. There was no like, self-proclaimed educators or brands. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what a brand is. He's like, well, what do you want? You do these extensions. And I was actually teaching people way back then because I did it so different. People are always like, hey, can I watch you? Can you teach me? Again, because I didn't value what I had created, I would be like, sure, no problem. I'd teach people for free. I didn't care. I found a lot of value in just helping other people. So, but again, when you lose it all, you kind of have to take the skills that are in front of you and make it magic. So I felt very unqualified at the time, not in doing hair, but positioning myself as a brand leader. So my husband came to me one day. He's like, what do you want to call it? These extensions that you created. I'm like, I don't know. They look natural. They're done with beads and they're on a row. He's like, cool, Natural Beaded Rows. So, and now we just call it like NBR or, whatever it is. But I started this brand, but I think the hardest thing that I had to come to realize in the beginning was I was not at this level of success of a Paul Mitchell or a Vidal Sassoon. So if I acted like that on social media, it comes across inauthentic. And so I literally put my MacBook or my Mac up in my bathroom. I had like toddlers in the background. And I just started talking about different shampoos and different products I liked. And then I would just be like, hey, I created an extension technique. If you're interested, email me. It wasn't DM. There's no DMs. I was like, email me. And it was crazy because I went from feeling like, oh, I can't charge these prices, I can't do this, to within like 6 months of starting my brand, we actually moved from Utah to Arizona. And I had in this tiny little town in the middle of like nowhere, like I joke around, but like we were next to like 2 cow farms kind of thing. And within 6 months of moving to Arizona, more than half my clientele was flying into me.
Oh, so wow.
It was just crazy. So I feel like, we only lived in Arizona for 2 years, but it was so on purpose because now I've educated thousands of artists and they'll be like, oh, I can't do that because I live in a tiny town. I'm like, well, let me tell you a story.
Seriously. No, and my PR agency, we worked with funded technology startups. So we were on the east coast of Canada, this town called Moncton, and there's like 150,000 people in the area, like the entire like greater Moncton area. And the mindset back then, this was like 2012, was you have clients in your area.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have a single Canadian client, let alone anybody that was next door. Our clients were in South Africa, the Valley, San Diego, all over the US, Europe. And people wondered how we did it. I go, well, what we do online, we can do anywhere. So why would we just look at what's next door? Because the companies next door couldn't even afford us. So we created the benchmark for success for the PR agency, knowing that there's probably a very few highly targeted clients that would be in Moncton and everyone else was outside. So you created this. Now people are flying in to you. Now, the product that you sell, was this something that only stylists and like salons could purchase, or anybody can buy these?
Well, in the beginning, so we had moved from Utah to Arizona, and I was still actively doing hair. So I was trying to get new clients in. But then this is where, when I started my brand, I wanted to educate. So I did like a couple classes of just like local people that knew me, because I knew nothing about like marketing. It was just people that in my area, and I had done a couple classes. And it wasn't until I moved to Arizona that same thing. I'm like, I'm in this tiny town, but I'm like, but that doesn't matter. Like I'm not looking to attract people in this town. I'm looking to attract other people. So I actually created my my first online product. And now everybody has an online product. But again, back 12 years ago, not very many people had online products, especially not hairstylists. So that was my first product. And it's so funny because I had no money to have a professional camera crew and all this. I literally had my husband come to my salon. He filmed it. I YouTubed how to edit it. I edited my own course. I literally built it out myself. It was like so scary. And I almost didn't put it out. Like I was like, I remember I've shared this story at a ton of like hair conventions and stuff that I've been at. But I was sitting there like editing my online course, and I was like, this is stupid. I'm not going to do it. How dare, who do I think I am? You know, all this imposter syndrome stuff. And I all of a sudden like felt like this like calm that's like, you have no idea who you're going to impact. And if you don't put this out there, you're being selfish.
And I was like, whoa. The impact.
Right?
We're doing the people who we want to serve a disservice by not showing up.
Right. Yeah. And so that's where I started. And then it kind of, you know, grew. But it's so funny because like, how many times do we not start something? And it's like, well, you got to start with where you're at. It's like we have this idea of who we want to be. And you're like, but you're not Paul Mitchell right now. So you got to start with where you're at and build upon that. So, I mean, I'm still not Paul Mitchell, but it's like I've come a long way
to be Paul Mitchell.
Yeah, I'm doing my own thing. But in the beginning, it's like a lot of people won't start out of fear of failure.
That's it. Or they do start, and then when they start to realize how much work has to go into the success, they pull back or they go really slow.
Yeah.
They go really slow. Then they see, oh gosh, the more I do this, the risk of the failure could be catastrophic, because the more you grow, the more there is on the line. And then they just pull back. I saw it in myself too, because there was like that upper limiting belief where I felt like my value was only worth $100,000 a year.
Right.
So for the longest time, I would not pay myself more than that.
Oh, that's funny. You're like, no, you should be happy with that.
Came, I would throw grenades into my business.
Oh, wow.
Bring it down. Bring down that thermostat a little bit so that it's somewhere that's a little bit palpable for me, because I don't feel like I'm worthy more than that.
It's like a self-sabotage.
Totally. And then what happened was, the more I did that, the less people I could serve, the lower my impact. And it's just crazy that we always filter ourselves based on what we think other people expect of us.
Right.
Like you know this coming from your childhood. Right. You had these grand visions of your life that probably did not fit into the structure of how you were raised. And you had to run away from that.
Well, and you know what's interesting about that though, is for me, when I made that decision, like, hey, this culture, this community is not for me, it actually was very freeing. So I think a lot of times we worry about, what family members and friends things and things like that. But for me, I almost felt like an outsider. So kind of breaking that it just felt very free. I was like, oh, I'm out. Yay, now I can create whatever I want.
So now you have this growing business and you've left Arizona. Where do you go after Arizona?
So that's when we only were in Arizona for 2 years.
Yeah.
We wanted to move to California, but we were in Utah and we had lost everything. So we couldn't afford to. I remember looking online. I was like, babe, we can't go to California. It's too expensive unless you want to live in like a 1-bedroom apartment.
Yeah.
And
with 5 kids, that'd be great.
Literally, I was like, that's not going to happen.
No.
And so I Googled what's the sunniest place in America, and it said Arizona. So that's that's what took us to Arizona.
Hilarious.
But when we got to Arizona, we lived in a really small town in the middle of nowhere because that's all we could afford. And it's funny because when we got there, I was like, oh, like the people that we lived with, I was like, this feels like we took a step down from where we were at. And so it was a great transition because we were just grateful to have a home and had like a cute little swimming pool. But we knew that it was just a speed bump. It was just a transition home. And so in Arizona is when I launched my brand of Natural Beaded Rows and my husband Garrett launched Wake Up Warrior. So once that 2 years was great though, because once we kind of went from losing everything, we had enough momentum in our brands and we had enough foundation. So then I was like, hey, I want to go to California. So that's when we ended up in California, and that was a decade ago. So
how much, now I'm starting to see the theme of our conversation. How much of the place that you decided to live had the influence on how you became successful?
Yeah, I think, well, what I realized in going to Arizona, it was crazy. I went to Arizona and I ended up like flying back to Utah and doing hair for like 3 days straight and then taking photos of my clients to market to get clients in Arizona. But yeah, the mindset, it was a good transition, but I was like, oh, this is not where we're supposed to be. Like it felt a little bit more smaller minded, but it was great. You know, it got us like back on our feet.
And then you moved to California, different ball game.
Yeah. I mean, but I loved California. It's weird to me to even, I like when we got to Florida, I was like, babe, is it weird we're here? Because we thought we'd be in California the rest of our lives. So
but
just kind of.
So the decade in California though definitely brought some prosperity.
Yeah.
How do you actually take like, you're going to places where I'm assuming you don't really have family and maybe not too many friends. How do you just start over and have your family and grow your business? Like that's a lot.
Well, it's interesting because in Utah, when we left, I felt like it was like we were losing everything. And I felt like all of our friends and everything were almost like distance. Like, so it was almost easy to leave. Like I said, they were like, oh, what are they doing? What's going on? Like I said earlier in the show, my husband had an emotional affair and it was just like, there was just like a lot of whispers. And I felt like people that would have had my back didn't. In fact, they were like kind of against us, it felt like. So for me, I was like, all I have is my husband and my family. So let's move and see if we can recreate this. Let's see if we can recreate our marriage. Let's see if we can recreate our businesses. Let's see what we can do. And it was definitely difficult because I had 2 kids at the time. Like I said, I didn't even know if I wanted to be married, but I felt like, okay, if I don't at least give my marriage a shot, having 2 kids, like that's not fair, right?
Yeah.
And so I told my husband after kind of like finding out about everything, I was like, hey, I am willing to like work on this. And that's when we started doing like weekly date nights. And we didn't realize that our relationship wasn't good until like we lost everything and it exposed us. I was like, oh, I don't really like you and I don't trust you now. And I don't have this safety and security anymore. So, but also I was the hairstylist. Wasn't making money at the time. So I was like in a vulnerable space where I'm like, I'm not going to leave you because I've got these 2 kids now. Yeah. So California was a chance for us to really rebuild. And it was hard. I felt like we had to put the time into our marriage. Like I said, we started just doing weekly date nights. And meanwhile, part of the reason, if I'm being 100% transparent, part of the reason I kept pushing my brand and my business is because I didn't know if I was going to stay married. I was like, well, I'm going to try to work it out with this guy that I have 2 kids with, but just in case, I want to be successful too. And I'm not saying that's the right way to go about it, but I never wanted to be in a situation where I felt like I had to be married to this man. I wanted to be in a place where I want to be married to this man. So for me as a woman, I'm like, well, I want to produce. And like I said, I had a standard and an expectation based off of how I was raised. So I put that standard and expectation on myself. And I just really like put a lot of time and energy into building my brand. Meanwhile, like our relationship actually started to get better.
I can imagine, just based on what I know of Garrett, I've met him a couple times and my husband talks about him, that he probably found this version of you the most attractive.
Oh, actually it was the opposite.
Oh no, really?
Yeah, because he felt like I was in dude mode. He's like, he felt like we were in competition. Like,
oh no.
That's when because I'm actually, it's funny, but I was in business mode. You know what I mean?
It's a very masculine energy.
Yes. And not only that, I was like, I was still earning back the trust with Garrett. I was like, you had an emotional affair and you didn't provide.
Got it. And so he's probably seeing as you now becoming this independent woman.
Yeah. So I think it might have been scary for him. I don't know.
Yeah, totally.
No,
I get it.
He, in fact, even now, like, he's like, I like that you're kind of you're balancing like the mom and this. But I notice it in myself. Like if I'm more in work mode, I show up differently. And so I have a lot of respect for men where it's like, you go work all day and you've got to come home and now not be so intense. Like I have a lot of respect and I understand that. But yeah, during that time, I think he was proud of my growth. Like, and I think it was like, he liked that for the first time we kind of related on like the business aspect of things. So I think there was a respect and a weird competition.
Healthy competition?
Yeah, I don't know. It was kind of back and forth for a while. And it's funny because I think all women kind of push their husbands. And we had rebuilt our lives and we were still renting a home. This is a random story. We were renting a home in Dana Point. And he comes home one day and he's like, hey, babe, I think I'm going to go buy a Lamborghini. And I was like, no, you're going to buy me a house before you buy a Lamborghini. And he was like, what? It actually sparked this like huge fight. But funny story, we ended up buying a home in like our dream neighborhood. And he was like, he didn't feel like worthy to buy a house again because we had lost our house. I'm like, we're not there anymore. And so that's when our relationships started to get better. And I started to kind of pump the brakes on the more masculine version of me. And I worked on really balancing it because I found like I enjoy being in my feminine, you know?
You also command attention in a good way. And I think you have conviction in the things that you want. Like saying that I want this house, saying that I want to move to Miami. It's like, you're a visionary.
Yeah.
You see it.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can be very threatening to a man too, because in our society, men expect to be the ones that are the providers, the ones that are the visionaries that make the big decisions with little influence. In here, little old you come in. Well, how tall are you? Everyone's short to me because I'm 6 feet.
I'm 5'3". I'm a tiny human.
You're tiny. So this tiny, cute Danielle comes in and says, nope, this is what I want. And this is where I want to be.
Yeah. There's definitely like there's certainty, but like, you know, when you like feel something and you're like, I can't ignore this. So for me, I almost feel like it's like a disservice if I'm not like, hey, no, like we're going here and you're coming with me, buddy.
So this is really good. So I know a lot of listeners have these dreams of what they want to achieve and they pull themselves back. This could be talking to a husband, a partner, business partner. How do you just say what you want without feeling guilty about it? What's a first step?
It's definitely, well, here's the thing. When we were losing everything, I didn't say anything. I was like, nope, you're just the wife. You're just the supporter. Don't say anything. Don't rock the boat. And I was actually paying a lot of the bills. So I'm seeing the credit card debt go up, but I didn't want to like question his masculinity and assume he didn't have it. Right. So I didn't say anything. And I literally say, I'm like, I did my family a disservice by not communicating with my husband and saying, hey, this doesn't look good. We need to course correct. And so for me, I remember after that happened, I remember just shifting my mindset immediately to when I feel something and I know it's true, as the wife and mother, I have to speak my truth. And sometimes, even if it's something where I'll tell Garrett, I'm like, hey, I'm going to tell you something that I'm feeling. And you can do with what you want with it, whether it's a business opportunity or whatever. I'm like, but if I don't share, like, it's like I'm harboring secrets. So
and then you just feel inauthentic.
Yeah. So for me, it's like, he knows, like, for example, when I'm like, hey, we need to go to Miami, it's almost like he was like, oh, thank you. Like, he wanted to go. So there are certain times where I'll have the conviction and I'll share with him, and he's like, that might be true for you, but it's not true for me. But then there's times I share things with him and he's like, oh, I'm on board with that. I also feel that. And so that's what's cool now, where we can come together where he's feeling it too, but I'm just the one that like nudges him a little bit, if that makes sense.
So I feel like if I don't speak my truth, that resentment grows inside of me. So my husband's on this car collection spree. So he has now 10 supercars in his collection, of which have been acquired over the last like year and a half. It all happened pretty fast. And then he was showing me this last car he finally got delivered like last week. And now he's starting to look at other cars. And I put on like a little Danielle and I said, no, your next purchase isn't a supercar, it's real estate. And the next day I walked in on him and his assistant having a meeting with a realtor in Cabo.
Oh, wow.
I go, isn't it crazy when you actually say what you want, or also like call somebody out where they're going wrong, things can happen in your favor.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do think I think that women should do that. Like,
yes,
there's no, and like you say, it's interesting because you're like, well, you know, they're the leaders and the guide, they're in protect. I'm like, men can't do it all.
No, they can't.
They can't do it all. And
but also like to defend them is there's a lot of men that don't want that pressure.
Yeah.
And that's just not how they're driven. And like what works out for you guys is that you have this dynamic of you're pursuing something that fills you up, that makes you happy. And there was probably like a period in your relationship where there was an adjustment because this is new to both of you and not what you expected. And probably not in your vows from 21 years ago when you first got married. It's kind of cool. And like, think about this too. When you ask for what you want and you stand in conviction with your needs, you inspire so many other people. Like the impact you have now, you can see it. It's even from me, I'm like, oh, wow, wait, you can just ask to move to another city and maybe it'll happen. It's crazy. It's crazy how these things happen.
Yeah.
It's cool.
But it's also too, it's like, I would never make a decision just because I'm like, this sounds fun. I always look at something as like, I think this is the best move for our family, you know?
Yeah.
So it's crazy though, because there's always like a backlash to it. Like we get here and my older teenagers are like mad at me because, you know, taken away from friends and all the things.
Totally.
But it's, you know, you as a mom, you're like, I'm doing what I believe is best for my family. So you kind of have to live in this space. Like you guys are going to be mad at me for the next couple months, but that's okay.
And then you'll make friends and then you'll realize Florida's great.
Yeah.
And the cool thing is that you can always go back to California to visit your buddies and they can come to Florida too. It's so easy to go across country.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've actually decided to pull our kids out of school next school year to go world school. They're at the right age where it's like pre-teenage, so they probably don't have those clicks just yet. And we're so excited for it, but also know that the reason why we're doing this now is because things were getting easy. Things were getting too predictable, too mediocre. And I think people who are living like that next chapter, or even that next book, are the ones that are like, how can we make our life more significant, create a bigger impact, and really truly live? Like live, ride on a moped in Bali during rainy season. Kind of live.
Is that what world school is? You just like travel and do school remote?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
We're
cool.
making a list of countries we want to go to.
Wow.
And we have some sort of curriculum. We don't know yet. It's going to be like Montessori meets Waldorf, whatever it is. But really putting intention and attention towards our kids' interests. Like Max, he's 12 and he has a YouTube channel that has almost 3,000 subscribers. And he's obsessed with learning YouTube. He's at this point now where he can almost start monetizing his channel. Like supporting that passion, but also knowing he could make a living from this. And if education is designed to create workers, well, we don't want them to be in the four walls of our system. We want them to be able to harness their superpowers.
How do your boys feel about it?
They love it. They love the idea. They're going to miss their buddies, but we've been traveling with them their whole lives, so they know what it's like to live in different beds and different time zones. And we'll test it out for a year and see how it goes. But it's kind of like, it's the dream. Like when you think of what does the dream life look like, traveling the world, teaching our kids, like the first thing that our kids ever learned to read was a menu at a restaurant. because we gave it to them. Like, what do you want? Like, we don't know. Pizza was the first word Noah knew how to read because it's a very unique and easy word to read. So he only ate pizza for the longest time. We taught them how to read a menu. And then at the same time, we taught them to order their own meals. So we weren't going to be a part of this thing anymore. And that confidence now for them to be able to just ask for what they need or want and read things. It's like education happens at home. It happens everywhere, not just in the four walls of a school. And we wanted to bring this to our kids. It's also going to test me, and it's going to test our marriage.
I was going to say,
too.
Are you teaching? Are you doing the teaching?
No way.
Oh, I was like,
even sit with myself for 30 minutes to read. Like, there's no. So the painting, the vision is we have a full-time educator / caregiver with us. So right now we have a full-time house manager. It would be kind of that role plus somebody who has an educational background. Because you think about it, they only do schoolwork for like 1 or 2 hours a day, max. And then the rest of the day is free. But this was something Dan had been wanting for like 10 years. And I said, no, it's not the right time. But he kept pushing it. And finally, all of our stars aligned to be able to do this. And we said, let's go. And we can pull the ripcord anytime we want. Like if Miami didn't work for you guys, you can go back to California.
Exactly.
Nothing is like definitive. And I think that's the thing that we need to teach people too, is like you can make these brave, bold moves and know you could be wrong. And that's okay.
What's crazy too is well, for example, like with just Miami, we're like, hey, let's move there. And there was like a few speed bumps, not a few, but there's a few significant things where we're like, maybe we shouldn't go. And I'm like, no, this is like a test. This is just like a speed bump. And so I'm like, I have a feeling like once we get there and get, grounded, we're going to be fine. But we can't let this little speed bump kind of dictate like what we knew we were supposed to do. So, and I think a lot of times people, they're like, oh, I should open this business or I should do this or I should travel the world. And then they get a speed bump and they're like, never mind. But it's like, you can always push through that. And that's what really helps us kind of grow and evolve too. So yeah, like when we finally got here in Miami, I was like, whew, we made it, even though there was like a few speed bumps, but ultimately I knew this was like the next step. So now I'm like, it's funny because we went back to Orange County and I was like, oh yeah, this doesn't feel like home anymore.
Yeah, it's crazy, huh?
So, but
yeah, we did that too. We went back to visit the East Coast. And I'm like, oh, I wonder if this feeling is going to be like. I miss my friends and family. They're incredible. Absolutely love them. Friends for life. But just their energy, it's kind of like, I've outgrown this. I don't fit into this spot anymore. And here we are now. And even now, it's like, this is home base. Maybe not forever, but we're definitely going to outtrip from here.
Like, at least you guys can travel. Thing. You can travel. So it's like you have your home base. Yeah. But yeah, you're kind of going to be all over the world, it sounds like.
That's it. We don't know where. Okay, this has been incredible. I do have one last question for you. When I ask you what it means to be a wild woman, what is that to you?
I would say I would rephrase that to being a free woman.
Ooh.
So I feel like there's like the wild side, but I think for me, I would say wild means just letting go, having fun, like whatever it looks like, speaking your truth, anything that makes you just feel free. Like, you want to go run on the beach naked? Do it.
Yeah.
If that's what makes you feel wild and free, go for it. Because there's a sense of power in feeling free. And the more free you feel, I believe the more authentic you show up.
100%. Love it. Okay. So if people want to go online to find you, where can they go?
So, well, you can go to multiple places. If they want information about hair, they can go to mbr.education. I have a blog, because I have two podcasts. I have one called Date Your Wife, and I have one called The Danielle K. White Show. But I love like fashion and fitness and hair. So I have a blog that just kind of has a little bit of everything. So that way, if people like just want to do the hair thing, they can just follow my hair page. If they want to follow kind of like more my personal brand, you can go to daniellekWhite.com. And again, it's just where I put all my podcasts, or if I have like a trip I go on or whatever it is, stuff that I love and enjoy, that's what I share. So those are the two platforms. Or on Instagram, you can just go to Natural Beaded Row Hair Extensions, or my personal page is just Danielle K. White.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun. I'm glad we made it work. My house, like I said, it's a bit chaotic because we just moved here. So, apologies for the dogs in the background. You might have seen a few kids running by, but
little cameos. That's all right.
Yeah, that's how it goes a working mom, you know?
There you go. You got to do what you got to do.
Yeah, love it. Well, thank you so much for having me on the show. And I look forward to having you on my show.